Photosynthesis takes place inside plants, inside their leaves. A leaf is a photosynthetic organ. It's the plant's way of generating its own energy. Now, this is what a leaf looks like if you take a cross-section of it. And you'll notice that it's got an interesting structure. On the top and the bottom of the leaf are these large, hollow, clear, transparent cells. This is called the epidermis, and the function of these cells is to let light through the leaf and also to keep water trapped on the inside. Water is an important ingredient for photosynthesis, so the plant makes sure that it doesn't lose water and dry out by having these transparent cells on the outside. As I said, water is an important ingredient for plants. They don't function without a continual flow of water through the leaf, and that's provided by this intricate network of beautiful veins, which you can see on any leaf that you look at. It's important for the cells also to receive carbon dioxide. Now, that epidermis of the leaf that keeps water inside also keeps carbon dioxide out. So the plant has these little tiny pores on the underside of a leaf. What we're looking at is this little tiny hole at the bottom of the leaf. It's called a stoma. If you have many stoma, you say that you have many stomata. Stomata is the plural. These little pores on the underside of the leaf allow carbon dioxide in, but they also allow water out. So the plant can open and close them as it chooses. If the stoma are open, that allows carbon dioxide to enter, but it also allows water to leave. If they're closed, then no carbon dioxide can enter, and therefore no photosynthesis can take place. When the plant is actively photosynthesizing, it's breathing in carbon dioxide and breathing out water and oxygen. It's called photorespiration. There's also a rather beautiful word called transpiration, which is the process of a plant pumping water from the earth up through its veins, up through its leaves, and the water leaving the leaves into the air, which is actually powerful enough to control weather. Let's go back to a cross-section of the leaf. Underneath the epidermis is this spongy layer packed full of chloroplasts. This is called the mesophyll. These cells are filled with 40 or 50 or 60 chloroplasts each. Each one is these little green blobs. And this is where the true magic of photosynthesis takes place. This is what an individual chloroplast looks like. This is an electron micrograph of a single chloroplast, and this is a drawing of that same thing. Each chloroplast is made up of a double membrane on the outside, and then inside the double membrane is this network of membrane-bound sacs. The membrane-bound sacs are called thylakoids, and they're all connected together. There's an inner space and an outer space of the thylakoid. The inner space is called the thylakoid space. It's also called the thylakoid lumen. Inside the chloroplast, but outside the thylakoid, that space is called the stroma. So you have the stroma inside the chloroplast, and then inside the thylakoid, you have the thylakoid lumen. The energy that powers all life is light. Light is a form of electromagnetic radiation. It travels from the sun, and sunlight is a mixture of all colors. It appears as white on Earth. Chlorophyll is the pigment inside of chloroplasts that captures that light. Chlorophyll appears green because green light is reflected from the chlorophyll molecules, while blue and red light is absorbed. When that blue and red light is absorbed by the plant, that is the light that is able to power photosynthesis. In addition to chlorophyll, of which there are two forms, there's also a a set of molecules called carotenoids, which expand the range of light that the plant can use. Interestingly, green light is the most common light that reaches Earth. The most intense light from the sun is green, but green light is not used by plants. Chlorophyll lives in the surface of the thylakoid membrane in a network with one chlorophyll molecule connected to the next one. All of these networked chlorophylls together surround a central chlorophyll, which is called the reaction center. The reaction center is where the magic happens. So when a photon of light hits a chlorophyll, the energy is passed from chlorophyll to chlorophyll to chlorophyll until it gets to the reaction center. The reaction center is where the energy can enter into the reactions of photosynthesis. All of those connected chlorophylls and also associated pigments like carotenoids, all of them together are called a photosystem. So a photosystem is a network of connected chlorophylls that capture energy from the sun, pass that energy to the reaction center, and the reaction center will then go on to pass that energy to the rest of the photosynthetic molecules.
The light reactions of photosynthesis are all about the transfer of energy. And the transfer of energy happens with the transfer of electrons. The movement of electrons is critically important for the light reactions. How does energy get into this system? It gets into the system in the form of light. Light enters the system actually in two different places. The light reactions are fairly complex, and there are in fact two different systems. What I've drawn here is the thylakoid membrane. This is the membrane of the thylakoid. On the inside is the thylakoid space. Inside the thylakoid. And on the outside is the stroma. On the outside of the thylakoid. Thylakoid space, stroma. All of the light reactions take place along the surface of the thylakoid membrane, and they're embedded in two different systems. Now, they aren't lined up like this in a real cell. They're all jumbled together, but we're going to keep them all lined up to make it neat. This system is called System 1, and this system is called System 2. But I'm actually going to go through them in the opposite order, because I want to follow the flow of energy as it originally starts, and it really starts in photosystem 2. So we're going to start with System 2. Light enters the equation from the sun. A photon comes along and it strikes one of these chlorophyll molecules. When it does that, it excites a magnesium atom at the center of that chlorophyll. What that means is that the magnesium atom started being calm and low energy. A photon struck it and its electrons popped up to a higher level. They became really excited and really energetic. Now those electrons are filled with energy, and the chloroplast is going to harness that energy of those really excited electrons. What happens is those electrons are so excited that they are actually passed off of the chlorophyll molecule and they hop over to a neighboring molecule. The neighboring molecule is a protein that's embedded in the membrane. Now, I don't want you to worry too much about the numbers of different things here. We can make this balanced if we wanted to, but I'm not going to really balance things for this whole time, so don't worry about it too much. Electrons hop over to the beginning of the electron transport chain, and then they're passed from one protein to another protein to another protein. That's what makes it called an electron transport chain, because electrons are being transported in a chain from one protein to another. Now remember, we're in system 2, so this is electron transport chain number 2. And this whole cluster of chlorophylls that captured that energy in the first place, this is called photosystem 2. It's a photosystem because it is a system of things that are capturing photons, or light. Now these electrons are passed along from one thing to another thing, but that means that they have left this photosystem, they have left the chlorophyll. This chlorophyll cannot have too few electrons, it cannot just continually give away electrons, it needs to get them back. Where does it get them back from? It actually steals them from a nearby passing water molecule. A water molecule in a thylakoid space will give up its electrons and be split apart. It's going to be split apart into positive hydrogen ions, really just a proton at this point, and oxygens. Now, one oxygen hates to be by itself. It hates to be by itself so much that any nearby water molecule is going to react with that oxygen. This oxygen is going to steal another oxygen off of a nearby water molecule and become O2, resulting in 4 H pluses hanging around in here, and all of those electrons being passed along the electron chain. All right, this oxygen is a side product. It's going to leave the plant. These H pluses are going to accumulate in the thylakoid space. We'll see even more H pluses in a second. In fact, we're going to see more H pluses right now, because this electron gets passed along from protein to protein all along the electron transport chain, and as it gets passed, it actually loses energy. It calms down. It was in a really excited state, and it's going to calm down and calm down and calm down. But that energy doesn't go nowhere. That energy doesn't disappear. That energy is used. It's used to take hydrogen ions and pump them from outside to inside. This is a form of active transport because it takes energy to bring these H pluses into this already highly H plus rich environment. This is getting more and more and more acidic, and the energy from the electrons is being used to make it even more acidic. Now this electron still isn't done. It's passed along, but now it has lost all of its energy. We need to recharge it if we're going to stick it onto something else, because this electron can't accumulate here. We can't just have a continual input of electrons. The electrons have to go somewhere. If they can't go anywhere, the system stops. So where's that electron going to go? First, we need to recharge it. We need to get it back up to a high energy state. We're going to do that by passing it on to another chlorophyll. This other chlorophyll is part of photosystem number 1. And photosystem number 1 can get energy from outside of itself, from light. So light molecule, or not a light molecule, a photon is going to come along in, it's going to strike this chlorophyll, and it's going to re-excite these electrons. It's going to hop them back up to a high energy state. Now we've got excited electrons again, and they're going to be passed along another electron transport chain. All of our electrons get passed along this electron transport chain, and they still have to go somewhere. They cannot just hang out in the membrane forever. They need to have a final destination. Their final destination is an NADPH. So, this last member of the electron transport chain is a catalyst. It catalyzes this reaction. Whoops. NADP plus H plus is going to result in NADPH. If you remember, that NADPH is a molecular battery. This is a charged up battery. similar to ATP. NADP plus is a cation, it's positively charged. H plus is a cation, it's positively charged. How are we going to put two positively charged things together and result in a neutral product? Well, of course, that electron is going to come in here. So this NADPH plus H plus, they accept that electron. We have an electron acceptor at the end of the chain. So what we have is an electron donor. These water molecules. And finally, at the end, an electron acceptor. Now, after all of this is done, what have we accomplished? We've accomplished two things. Thing number one is that we have charged up some NADPHs. We're going to need those. Thing number two that we've done is we've created a gradient. It's called a proton gradient because an H plus is just a proton. And if you'll remember, a gradient is when there's a higher concentration on one side of the membrane than there is on the other side of the membrane. So this is our thylakoid. Now, we have all of these protons, all of these H pluses on the inside of the thylakoid and not very many on the outside. We have H pluses that came from the water when the water donated an electron. We have H pluses that got actively pumped in through this electron transport chain number 2. And electron transport chain number 3 resulted in losing some H pluses from the outside. So it's more and more concentrated protons on the inside, less and less concentrated on the outside. This proton gradient is really important for the final part of the light reaction. All right, so where are we? We're looking at a thylakoid. This thylakoid is not drawn at all to scale, but I wanted to have a good sense of what the inside and the outside was. So this is our thylakoid, this is the thylakoid space. Or the lumen, and this is the stroma. Now, after all of our photosynthesis, after photosystem 1 and photosystem 2 and electron transport chain 1 and electron transport chain 2, after they have all done their jobs, what does this system look like? What it looks like is that on the inside of this thylakoid, we have a high concentration of protons. All of these protons on the inside of the thylakoid. Remember all of those photosystem 1, photosystem 2, those are all embedded in the membrane as well. I'm just not showing them. The only protein complex that I'm showing is this guy right here. This guy is called ATP synthase. ATP synthase is the synthesis complex that's used to make ATP. A's lets you know that it is an enzyme. Really, it's actually a beautiful complex of many enzymes working together and is quite extraordinary. The way that this works is it takes advantage of this proton gradient. High protons on the inside, highly acidic on the inside, comparatively speaking. Basic on the outside, low protons on the outside. Now these protons, they would like to flow across the membrane and be even on both sides, but we have pumped them in here. And filling the inside of the thylakoid with protons is a little bit like pushing water up a hill. The water wants to flow down, the protons want to flow down, but they can't. They're blocked by a dam or a dike. In this case, they're blocked by the membrane. These protons cannot really easily cross the membrane. It's hard for them to get through because they're charged. And the inside of the membrane, as you know, is hydrophobic. It doesn't like charged things. These protons want to flow across, and so we can actually take their tendency to flow across and use the energy that they release as they do that. Pumping protons inside a membrane is like pushing water up a dam. It wants to flow back down. And when it flows back down its gradient, when these protons flow across the membrane, we can capture that energy. And that's what ATP synthase does. It allows protons to flow through it. And as those protons flow down their gradient, as they go from high concentration to low concentration, they actually turn a physical turbine. It's quite incredible. They turn this turbine, and as it turns this turbine, it turns chemical energy, the energy of this, the potential energy of this proton gradient. It turns that into mechanical energy of turning a turbine, and then it turns that mechanical energy back into chemical energy and forms ATP. So it takes an ADP and an inorganic phosphate and it crushes them together with this mechanical turning and forms ATP. And that's how ATP gets made, which is made by separating out high protons from low protons. And then as the protons want to flow down their gradient, you capture that energy with ATP synthase. So, to sum up, the overall point of the light reactions of photosynthesis is to capture energy from the sun and use that captured energy to charge up molecular batteries. During photosynthesis, two types of molecular batteries are charged: NADPH and our good old familiar standby ATP. Energy from the sunlight is captured by chlorophyll. It's used to excite electrons. The electrons are passed along a transport chain, and that transport chain is used to do two things. Thing number one is create a proton gradient with high protons inside the thylakoid, low protons outside the thylakoid. And thing number two that electron transport chain does is allow those electrons to join NADP plus and H plus together to create NADPH, thus charging up our NADPHs. The proton gradient of high protons inside the thylakoid, low protons outside the thylakoid is used to power ATP synthase, which creates ATP from its precursor, ADP, plus inorganic phosphate. At the end of the light reaction, we have charged up batteries. These charged batteries will then use their energy to power the capture of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and create glucose.